Thanks for tuning in to Out of the Wild, the Angsty Dad in America podcast. I'm your Angsty Dad, Earl, and today it's just me. It's a solo cast. I'm going to play some songs for you just to make it up, and I am going to talk about American conservatives in 2018. Stay tuned. This is going to get interesting. Be out the wild. Hello, and welcome to Out of the Wild, the Angsty Dad in America podcast. I am your Angsty Dad, Earl. How are you? Well, I hope. Today's a little bit different than we usually do. We're not going to have a guest. I'm not going to have a guest on today because the Hurricane Florence just passed through. And it made it difficult to coordinate, quite honestly. So today it's just going to be me. It's a solo cast, and I got something I want to talk about. First of all, everyone's fine from Florence. We did do some damage to my town. I did some flooding and stuff in Charlotte, but no one I know at least was hurt, although there were 14 people killed in the aftermath of it. But everyone's okay. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about Florence. It wasn't nearly the event I thought it was going to be, although, like, again, it did knock down a huge 100-year-old tree in my neighborhood. There was flooding. It was kind of, we lost power for 2 days at my house, but we went to my sister-in-law's house and just kind of watched the storm for a couple of days, and then it was done. For the most part, we even drove around in it, when it was going on. It wasn't like, it was just very consistent. No, where we were, it wasn't particularly dangerous. It was just very consistent. So again, we're all fine. No one I know got hurt, so that was good. So today, since it is just me, I wanted to kind of delve into a topic that's been on my mind here the last few weeks. I didn't do a lot of social media. I think I mentioned this before in the show. I didn't do a lot of social media before I started doing this podcast. So it's been just over a month. This is, I think, show number 8. So about 2 months I've been doing this podcast. Not quite, about a month and a half, whatever. I did Facebook, obviously, Instagram. Twitter is new to me. So I jumped on Twitter recently, and for the sake of expanding my beliefs, I guess, or just being able to view other people's opinions, I started following a lot of right-wing folks on Twitter. So your Charlie Kirks, your Candace Owens, of course, the president, and just random people as well. And I do so not out of interest of, I'm not necessarily interested in the individual, but the ideas they represent, especially people like Candace Owens, because she's black. Let's be honest, she's black. And so what I'm going to, and to me, a black conservative is weird. And what I'm going to jump into may be considered an uncomfortable truth or some uncomfortable truths, but I want to talk about conservatism. And I really have some questions, more than answers, some observation. So first, let me say this. I got interested in politics when I was young. My grandfather and my mother were very active. My grandfather especially, he taught political science. He was always involved in the election. He was friends with David Dinkins. We're from New York originally. My mom worked for David Dinkins. I think she did some work for the Clintons early on. In 92, my grandfather campaigned went out and stumped for Clinton in his neighborhood, encouraged people to vote, the whole nine. So politics has always been in our veins. They've been advocates. They've protested. It's always been in our veins. It's always been in our blood. It seems inevitable that we would get involved in it. I've always followed politics. And I've always noticed the difference, obviously, between liberal and conservative. It's always been readily apparent to me. And in my mind, I've always fallen on one side of that. Like, in my mind, I couldn't even understand some things that were related to conservatism. And in fact, as I'm getting older, the perspective becomes less concrete to me. It becomes a less tenable message that's delivered by conservatives. And here's what I mean. We spend so much time, people are like, we don't want to demonize conservatives. We don't want to demonize Trump voters, blah, blah, blah. But like I said, being on places like Twitter, which is essentially just a big open room where everyone's talking shit, being on places like Twitter and interacting with people, you can't help but to notice that they all kind of react the same way. And it's difficult not to get to the point where you demonize these human beings or you look at them as someone different than you, especially now. We're living in very polarized times. So one thing I noticed for social media, they're way better at social media, those on the right. They utilize it. They use it very well, very effectively. They get down to business. They spread information. We'll get to that in a second. But that is their preferred platform to spread misinformation. The second thing I noticed, another thing I noticed at least, is that if you go after any one of them, their friends swarm. There's very much a group think that goes on among some of these folks. And this is not just on social media. You see this in everywhere, really. They're very organized, and they swarm. So if you attack one of their friends or whatever, they're going to be on you like white on rice in a heartbeat. They're always insisting they're constantly insisting that liberals and the mainstream media are in cahoots. So, you quote facts, reporters do their due diligence, but somehow everything that's done is attack on the president or attack on conservative people, in general, which is insane. For example, this kind of sums up a lot of things I've said so far. The social media as a preferred medium, group attack, insisting that the liberals and mainstream media are in cahoots against them and specifically the president. Over the weekend, there was a video or a picture passed around the internet of Anderson Cooper. He was like waist deep in flood water. When just out of the original shot, if there's another picture taken of the cameraman, filming Anderson Cooper, the cameraman standing in like a few inches of water, whereas Anderson Cooper standing in a few feet of water. And while that is an accurate picture, the picture wasn't from Hurricane Florence, it was from Hurricane Ike, which was 10 years ago. And the reason he was even standing in that water was to illustrate the point of how deep the water gets, because that was a road. But this was shared by Donald Trump Jr., no less, and circulated all around the internet. People are perpetuating a lie. Not a problem with it. They're also really quick to insult your intelligence. I've been called dumbass. I was called an inbred recently. But this all comes in service to their inability to express their opinions. For example, I got into a debate with a kid about gender roles. And the only way he was able to support his argument was by using a very simple definition that was provided by the dictionary, dictionary.com. I'm like, that's not how you can't just fight an argument on something as complicated as gender roles using just the dictionary definition. That's insane. That doesn't even amount to anything. But I'm attacking the guy. I'm rude. I'm all these different things. It's crazy. Another thing that they do that blows my mind, that is allowed to happen, is that they continuously cite themselves or people who are like-minded or institutions that are blatantly right-wing. So there's this kid online. He's a black kid from New York. He considers himself a conservative, but he also considers himself a free thinker, which I'm going to touch on that. But he just kind of regurgitates the party line, Republican Party line, walks around in his MAGA cap, all that good stuff. He constantly quotes himself. He'll say something like, the depression rate amongst trans people is twice as high as that of people, non-trans people. He'll say that on Twitter and then quote himself on Instagram saying that. He has a lot of followers. It's dangerous to me. It's irresponsible. What's even more dangerous is when people quote like the Cause of Action, which is a Koch brothers funded law firm that studies poverty and inequality, but it's reflective of right-wing values, or like the American Enterprise Institute, which is a conservative think tank, which the people I see quote for all kinds of information. So we're not they're living within a bubble insofar as they're just kind of bouncing the same information back and forth, quoting themselves, quoting each other. Another thing, obviously mainstream media is fake news until it can be used to validate one's opinion. I recently saw that Donald Trump used the New York Times to validate, I don't remember what it was, but I just know that I saw that he retweeted an article from the New York Times that was validating him, or maybe it was, I can't remember which one. But it's just insane to me that we're like, oh, this is fake news until it proves a point that you're consistent with. Fake news. Fake news. That's that's a whole fucking other thing. But the fact that we call this shit fake news, I have friends, people I love, people I've cared about for a long time who are like, yeah, CNN's fake. They can't stand CNN. Fake news. Fake news? Are you fucking kidding me? And because certain groups of people don't want to even acknowledge reality, don't want to accept news, don't want to accept facts, they're more likely to perpetuate myths. And it's not just like the birther shit, even though that was a big deal, but it's an overall denial of history. For example, one thing that a lot of these folks I've encountered always say is a myth is the separation of parties. Or I should say, I guess it's more like from the 50s to the 60s, maybe early 70s, you can argue, the Democratic and Republican parties kind of swapped ideologies. You had a lot of Southern Democrats who were very conservative, very anti-civil rights and all that stuff. Republicans at the time were more so civil rights, and a lot of Northern Democrats were as well. There was a huge shift. There was a huge, I shouldn't say huge, but there was a divot between Republicans, or between Democrats in the North and Democrats in the South. So when the Democrats and ultimately Lyndon B. Johnson was the one who signed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, and he was a Democrat. A lot of support from Republicans at the time, overwhelming support from Republicans. But when it happened, and the Civil Rights Act went through, those Southern Dixiecrats, a lot of them, your Jesse Helms, Strom Thurmond, they switched parties, okay? So the Dixiecrats were gone. They became Republicans. Now, the Republican Party is a predominantly Southern party. I don't think that we can even debate that at this point. A lot, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, the Carolinas, they all usually go for Republicans. There was an ideological shift. You could see it. You know, like I said, Lyndon, you could look it up. It's verifiable. But these people say that it's a myth. Constantly say it's a myth, which is fucking mind blowing to me because it's so verifiable. We're told they say they perpetuate that the things that the liberal teachers taught us are wrong, and that we, as a result, we need to open our eyes and take the red pill. It's strange. And these are just people I'm talking to. These are not the candidates running for office, like your Ron DeSantis, who said something to the effect of, electing his opponent Andrew Gillum, who would be the first black governor of Florida. He said, "Let's not monkey this up." And I saw people online defending that, saying, "Oh, that's a common American phrase, monkey." I've never heard in my 32 years of life anyone ever say, "Let's not monkey this up." What the fuck does that mean? About a black guy. Man, DeSantis never said the word monkey prior to that interview after Andrew Gillum won the nomination. Never, in not one interview did he say the word monkey. Now all of a sudden there's a black guy, he says the word monkey. People are like, he's not racist, liberals are too sensitive. It's another thing, they deny racism even exists in some cases. Not at all, but in some. And ultimately, this has led me to ask this question. I could go on and on and on and on and on. But ultimately, this has led me to ask this question. It's actually a couple of questions, I guess. Maybe observations. I don't know. One, we can't separate Republicans, be they Republican voters or people running for Senate, Congress, governor, whatever, from Donald Trump. We can't separate the two. They're not different. Donald Trump is the head of the Republican Party de facto because he's the president of the United States. Okay? His rhetoric trickles down to the people around him. The people who are trying to get in office now are not regular old Republicans with bad ideas. These are even more dangerous people. Okay? The reason is they don't have ideas of their own. And the ideas that they do have are generally are just echoes of those of the presidents. And people say, "Oh, what about the economy? The economy's doing great." Yeah, the economy's doing great despite Donald Trump. Do you honestly think this man is sitting in the Oval Office masterminding this economy? And let's not trick ourselves, and this may be a conversation for another show, but there are definitely signs and symptoms that the economy is going to go south in the next couple of years. I guarantee you, if Trump makes it to 2020, we will not be sitting on the economic numbers that we are right now in terms of unemployment, in terms of where the stock market is, etc. But again, that's a whole other show. So there's Republicans running right now. There are people who are voting for these Republicans. They are reflecting the president. Okay? So you can't separate the two. It's not like you have Republicans and you have the president as different things. They're one and the same at this point. Now, I know not every Republican necessarily agrees with the direction of the Republican Party, but you have to accept that they are one and the same. Fucking Roy Moore, who was alleged pedophile, got like almost half the vote. In Alabama, Republicans voted for him because they refused to vote for the Democrat, who honestly isn't really that much of a liberal. So, we can't separate the two. And then I have to ask this question. Is it not the case, can we not make the argument at this point, that everything that's happened in the Republican Party and the conservative movement since probably just after the Civil Rights Act has kind of ultimately culminated here? Think about it. Anti-immigration, anti-LGBT, your Willie Hortons, your Southern strategy, your Lee Atwaters, campaigns strictly built on fear and racism have been kind of the Republican calling card, the conservative calling card. Look at Fox News. Every fucking time, I used to work in a medical office, and every time Fox News was on the television, there was an alert across the screen. There was an alert, always an alert. There's always something to be excited about and scared about. Because if they keep people afraid, they'll keep people tuning in. People need to know what they need to be afraid of. So they perpetuate that fear. And please don't get me wrong when I say this. I have been critical of Democrats as well. I think the Democratic Party as an institution is problematic, but you cannot tell me that in modernity, Republicans are somehow the party of civil rights and tolerance, and Democrats are the party of violence and intolerance and all that bullshit. That's simply not the case. It's simply not the case. And so again, my question is, can we not deduce that years and years of rhetoric, years and years of being anti-gay, anti-immigrant, anti-woman, all these things have not culminated in Donald Trump? He is the embodiment of this reality that has been this rot that has been at the core of the conservative party for so long. And so I mentioned this kid that I've interacted with on Twitter and Instagram. I'm not going to say his name because he's a minor, but he considers himself a public figure. He considers himself someone who appreciates diversity of thought, all that good stuff. But again, this is where I saw all of it. Whenever I try to challenge him, he backs away. There's name calling. There's a lot of group attack. There's all these different things. And he's black. And now I understand that blacks have been conservatives for a long time. I get that. There's a lot of black conservatives. I wouldn't say a lot, but there's a decent amount of Trump voters who are black. But that's the thing I don't get. Okay, and maybe someone can explain it to me. But if you are black, if you are Hispanic, if you are a woman, if you're gay, how can you continuously support people who don't have your best interest in mind? And I'm not saying the Democrats have people's best interest in mind as a group. Like I said, the institution is also bad. Okay? Bill Clinton, overrated, fucking racist as far as I'm concerned. Maybe not racist is too strong of a word, but his policies were not advantageous toward African Americans. They were not advantageous toward gay people, etc. Okay? So, and you can see that, over time from top to bottom. But as time is going on, the Democratic Party is growing and expanding in terms of its sphere of influence and in terms of the makeup of it. So you can't even argue that today's Democratic Party is an inherently racist or sexist party, because now it's comprised mostly of minorities and women. You cannot say the same for the conservative movement, although there are those who are within it who perpetuate this notion of Anglo-Saxon patriarchy is somehow still good for the ever diversifying face of America. So basically, they're just reciting old masters' good lines. I mean, that's what it is. When I look at Candace Owens, I am sickened. And the crazy thing about it is that these black conservatives, they call themselves free thinkers. I guess because they're black and they're not, they're off the plantation of the Democratic Party. They call themselves free thinkers, but they're just reciting the party lines. This kid that I mentioned, whose name I won't mention because he's a minor, he says that he's a free thinker because he believes that global climate change is a real thing, whereas many people in his party don't. And to me, that's fucking enough not to want to be a part of that party. I don't get it. I don't get it. Why would you just deny facts? Why do you deny science? I don't understand. Why do you think, you say small government and personal liberty, personal accountability, but whenever someone says something that a Republican did, especially the president, conservative, they're quick to say what Obama or Hillary did. Where's the personal responsibility? Personal liberty? Let's just look at our prison rate. Now, that's not just Republicans. Don't get me wrong. I'm not just saying conservatives are responsible for prison, but conservatives are quick to say that a black dude who's driving in his car, a Hispanic guy driving in his car with some weed should go to jail, whereas the white guy who is having a similar thing or has a similar offense shouldn't. Or even better, a black guy who maybe, kills somebody because they harmed his daughter is more of a criminal, or at least is depicted more negatively than as a white guy who killed his own kids. That happened recently. That's a real thing. Black guy gets shot by the police. He should have been obeying the law. It's weird. It's weird. It's almost hypocritical. Republican Party advocates, they said they advocate small government, but they want to make sure that women can't get abortions. They don't have to gut vote Roe v. Wade, by the way, if they just keep picking at it piece by piece in certain places. But the thing about it is, I guess what I'm trying to say is I just don't understand conservatism in modernity. I don't understand the modern day conservative party. I don't understand why we still are required to look at both parties as though they're equal when they're clearly not. Modern day conservatism is a rot. It's a blight on America. And it's a reflection of ages of decay, moral decay that's already taken place within the conservative movement. Conservatism in 1988 does not mean the same thing as 2018. Because progress is the only way for any society to move forward. Clutching on to the old norms and the old values and which you thought made America great to begin with is completely different what actually does make America great. You have people like Tucker Carlson going on Fox News saying that diversity is dangerous. Think about the institutions that will destroy, like marriage. Someone like me, whose wife is white, has biracial children, that sounds a little fucking crazy. And it's not like Tucker Carlson isn't a mouthpiece for the right. Like I said, they regurgitate the information. So you have Charlie Kirk retweeting Tucker Carlson, and then Candace Owens retweeting Charlie Kirk. Now, I'm not saying that specific instance happened, but that's how it's done. And then one of them will retweet themselves, and then they'll say this is information. And like I said, and it's just this vicious circle of misinformation and bullshit that they have ignorant ass voters buying into. And don't fucking tell me that there's no racial tension there either, because Donald Trump won every single group of white people, regardless of their income range. Okay, so it's not about jobs. There's racial anxiety there. It's not being properly addressed because we don't like to talk about the shit. People are like, oh, maybe if we just don't talk about it, it will go away. It will never go away. It can only go away for white folks. It doesn't go away for the rest of us. It doesn't go away. So, I know I just went on a rant for, 20-some minutes maybe? 21 minutes. I got a lot of questions. And I haven't been very interactive lately, so I would like to be. If you're listening to the show, please, 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 hit me up. Let's have a conversation about this. What are your thoughts on conservatism in America? I'm especially interested in the black conservative. That's the person I don't understand. I understand the least. I really do. And when I say conservative and Republican are not necessarily the same thing, just like liberal and Democrat aren't the same thing. I consider myself a liberal person, liberal-minded. My philosophies are liberal. I don't necessarily consider myself a Democrat, although, since we only have a two-party system, if I had to choose, obviously, Democrats more closely align with my values, but they're a fucked-up party as well and have had issues over time, which we're going to go into another time. But I'm talking about conservatives today. I don't get them. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. I don't understand how you're expected to debate with anyone if they don't accept facts as the logical basis from which to proceed. I don't get it. So like I said, if you can explain it to me, if you want to talk about it, if you want to express your frustrations as well, please do. I don't push this around, but now that I am on Twitter, you can check me out. Since we're talking about it, I guess, since I'm talking about it. Check me out on Twitter by all means. I would love to get some interactions with people. My handle, or what is it, my tweet name, whatever it's called, Out of the Wild Pod, or at the Angsty Dad, that's at the Angsty, ANG, STY, Dad. You can also check me out on Instagram. Out of the Wild Podcast is the name on Instagram as well. So let's have a conversation. I want to know what you guys' thoughts are on the matter. I want to know, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm just insane. But I don't think so. So please, somebody, anybody, hit me up. Let's talk about it. Thank you for listening. I'm gonna put 2 songs on today since we don't have a guest. And I hope you guys enjoy. We out the wild. Y'all have a wonderful afternoon. Let's ponder on this a little bit, and I'll talk to y'all next week. One love. My time don't get nobody in this world. My time don't get nobody in this. My time don't get nobody in this world.
What if times don't get no better than this? What if times don't get no better than this? No. What if times don't get no better than this? What if times don't get no better than this? No. What if times don't get no better than this? Used to reminisce when I was a kid. Mama had to work all day, and daddy ran away another day for a hard-working black family. I stayed praying that money would come our way. I wouldn't take it, all her pain go away, and everything will be A-okay. Another day for a hard-working black family.
What if times don't get no better than this? Was a kid on the block with the ball and the mitt. Then everything changed, got strange and rearranged. But who's to blame? It's just the ways of the game. Yeah, the struggle continues, but refuse to stop. And you gotta keep it moving till you reach the top. You got the city on your back and it weighs a ton. But if the battle's just begun, let's get it done.
What if times don't get no better than this? What if times don't get no better than this? No. What if times don't get no better than this? What if times don't get no better than this? No. What if times don't get no better than this? Now I'm all grown up, same thoughts still exist. Still hoping and praying I can give more to my mom. So I stay in the studio writing songs. They say things could get much better. Work real hard, then comes that cheddar. I say we gon' make it through. This one's for you, dear mama.
What if times don't get no better than this? Sometimes you get the switch, sometimes you get the miss. But that's just the way that it goes for the Brooklyn kid that everybody knows. But it used to be different, stood 5'3". The high school dropout got the GED. Things back at home wasn't melded so right, so I have to turn style and I broke my
What if times don't get no better than this? What if times don't get no better than this? No. What if times don't get no better than this? What if times don't get no better than this?
I'm too lost in the sauce, no matter the cost. I'm trying to make it from the bottom to the boss, and I don't even care if I take a loss. Cause I live and I learn the lesson lasts a lifetime, and I ain't getting cross. You niggas soft, my mental like a brick wall. Cool like menthol, I spark a spliffy, then I lift off. And if you about my shit and feeling pissed off, froze my wrist off, it's from the hustle like I'm Rick Ross. Went from some bucket list shit to a hobby, now I just can't get enough of this shit. Never sleep, always work, I can't give up on this shit. Till I got about 1 million people bumping this shit. Holla. And I remember I ain't have $1 to seeing something that I want and I got a copy. The way I speak it on my future got me like a prophet. And this the free shit, just wait till I'm making a profit. Wait till I'm making a profit. And this the free shit, wait till I'm making a profit. The people they ask me to stop it, but this the free shit, just wait till I'm making a profit.
Now throw your hands up for the bad guys. Raise a Ramon at your neck for your blind side. You don't want no problems, don't be looking at me side. Spinach in my pipe, smoke that shit like Popeye. Baby, I'm Pluto, about to steal your bitch. Vicious in this bitch like a roundhouse kick. Like Holly hit the spliff with the window tint. Tryna fuck the world, but my dick won't fit. Like risen from storms, damn what you're born. Children of the corn, it's time to rally the horn. Not the final form, come together like Zords. Gross and common like porn, shut it down and perform. So, settled the score, ready for war. New purpose was born, set in stone, destiny's war. Love a galore, or maybe that glow. But don't you Dare throw off my groove, Emperor Goose go. Yeah, no label author, but playing the part 2. If they was just some sales, they'd be more like a cartoon. And not a good one, I like the ones that we on. The ones that got these niggas hating cause they swear that they grown. Still chasing hoes. The ones that jog where they at. Claim they hard cause they strapped, but cannot go where we at. Shit, it's peace and love, got no time for all that. I'm cross the country with the homies sitting way in the back. But we on. Now throw your hands up for the bad guys. Raise a Ramon at your neck from your blind side. You don't want no problems, don't be looking at me side. Spinach in my pipe, smoke that shit like Popeye. Maybe I'm Pluto, about to steal your bitch. Vicious in this bitch like a roundhouse kick. Probably hit the spliff with the window tint. Tryna fuck the world, but my dick won't fit.